Hello, everyone, and welcome to Awards Buzz Oscar nominations reactions. I'm Abe Friedtanzer.
I'm Sari Cohen.
I'm Scott Menzel.
I'm Shadan Larki.
And I'm Stacey Yvonne.
And we are here to go category by category to figure out, were there any surprises? Is this nominations list not that interesting? Or will we discover something along the way? So we're going to start with one of the categories that we haven't necessarily thought too much about, best live action short. In this one, I'm pleased that there's one film which was announced as Alien. I read it as Alien, that I predicted, no one else did. But we did all predict Anuja, which again, we're not entirely sure on the pronunciation of that one. The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent, I'm Not a Robot, and none of us saw The Last Ranger. The only thing I would say that's noteworthy right now about this category is that despite Emilia Perez doing so well, Zoe Saldana's short Dovecote did not get nominated. So that was the only thing I immediately thought of. I don't know if you guys have seen these films. Do we have any other thoughts here?
That's why I had Dovecote and I stuck with it because I was like Zoe Saldana, but it didn't pan out. Which that's the thing is like I had certain hunches that I stuck with and it paid off, and then some of them that I like all season long just rode the ship all the way off to whatever did not pan out well for me. But we'll get into it. It's fine. I'm okay.
Yes, well, I mean, I think Abe tried to sell us on that on the last stream, and I'm glad that I went with my gut on that one and didn't put it in there.
I didn't predict it, but we did all those of us who predicted think an orange from Jaffa would get in, and I'm surprised that one didn't, because for a film that deals with a very sort of prickly conflict, it's actually not very controversial. The film itself is actually quite pleasant and lovely, and so I'm a little surprised. I think that maybe that's what we could all use right now, that kind of perspective. But we'll dig more into that as we all get a chance to watch those and then come back for our winner predictions. Moving on to animated short, none of us saw In the Shadow of the Cypress coming. However, we did see Beautiful Men and Yuck. And I'm excited. I think those are both fun films. Even though I didn't predict it, A Bear Named Wojtek, I'm a little surprised didn't get in. I feel like that was one that we all thought might get in. Otherwise,
that was my predicted winner for the category. So yeah, it's so good. If people have a chance to find it, it's definitely worth a watch, even though it didn't get in.
And I'm happy that Magic Candies got in, because that was sort of that was my lone pick there. But I really enjoyed that one. And again, we'll come back to this once we've had a chance to see more. Anybody else last call animated short commentary?
No, I mean, I think, I'm with Shadan on this. I'm actually really surprised the Bear Named Wojciech did not get in here. To me, it screamed this category, so I'm very surprised by that. That would probably be the one thing that I would say stands out.
Well, documentary short was our worst category. I think it was most people's worst category. We had three films: Michaela's Voice, A Letter to the World, Once Upon a Time in Ukraine, and A Swim Listen, which we all said would get nominated, and none of them were. We entirely missed two of the other musical-related films: Instruments of a Beating Heart and The Only Girl in the Orchestra. Those of us who guessed I Am Ready Warden, that was correct. Incident, also correct. And Death by Numbers. So a real emphasis on music and crime.
Well, here's the thing. I had a list of 10, like a long list of 10 for each category. And my goal was, please let all the nominations be from my list of 10. And this was the category that messed that up for me, because I didn't see Instruments of a Beating Heart coming at all. Like, I felt like it was on no one's radar. I checked all the predictions. It just came out of nowhere. So I don't know. I don't know to give myself grace and hold space for my mistakes here or what I'm supposed to do, but this just floored me. I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, usually we're pretty solid with these, and this category really threw me. I was like, wait, this again, like you said, it's just not even on my radar. So yeah, interesting turn of events there.
I also think Incident was the one I wasn't sure was going to get in, and that's the only one I predicted that did get in. But I will say Instruments of a Beating Heart and The Only Girl in the Orchestra are positive films, which we don't see a lot in this category. And while the other three are certainly important, there's at least a little bit of uplifting something. And I also believe a handful of these are available for public consumption, which is nice. But it is a fortunate transition to the only category where all of us predicted the same stuff and all of us were right. And I think everybody in the entire universe who predicted this category was completely right. We have no surprises whatsoever, an animated feature, no Moana 2 or something more obscure. We have Flow, Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul, and The Wild Robot. Is anybody still surprised by this list?
No,
No.
I really was like patting ourselves on the back for this. I mean, it was kind of like an obvious of like, yeah, there's what else is it gonna be? So yeah, it was cool.
And it's a good list. I mean, it's definitely
Yeah.
a great list. And I would have said The Wild Robot was ahead to win, but after today, I'm not so sure about that. So we'll have to revisit that in our winner predictions. But I don't think there's a solid front runner here.
Interesting. Okay.
I think a wild robot is still very much a lock in that category. Just because I know we're going to talk about in a few minutes what it missed out on, but it also gained something which wasn't as predicted. So, all right, next. Sorry, Abe.
So no, this is great. We'd like this. We're happy now. The documentary feature category was not as startling as I would have expected. We all got soundtrack to a coup d'etat. I unfortunately correctly predicted the snub of Daughters, which is still a little surprising, but everyone else had
Yep.
that in their predictions. Four of us went for Black Box Diaries, which I'm very thrilled got in. No Other Land, Sugar Cane. And I should have seen this coming. When I saw Porcelain War, I was like, you know what? This is a film that, especially with the emphasis on Ukraine in previous years, could probably get in. But no Will and Harper, no The Remarkable Life of Evelyn. Like, there's still a lot of films that missed out here, but it's not nearly as surprising a list as I would have expected, given that,
No.
you know, aside from Porcelain War, I think the other four were definitely on everyone's radar.
Well,
Yep.
Porcelain War was a movie that for so long was in my 5, and then I took it out, and now I'm just like kicking my again. I sometimes you got to listen to your gut, and it pays off, and sometimes it doesn't. But I did for a long time. Daughters was actually my predicted winners. The fact that that blanked completely was really shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Will and Harper. I go back and forth with it because I feel like in some degree, on some degree, I could feel like I could totally see it winning, garnering all the attention, and then I could totally also see it getting snubbed. So that was one that I just went back and forth. Was like this could go either way. So it was interesting now to find out which way it went.
They really do not like celebrities in this category. I feel like
They hate celebrities. We've learned this every year. We've learned this. It's crazy. I also want to. Shadan, sorry, I cut you off. You finish first, then I'll finish.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, they really don't like, and even with like the Superman doc not even making the short list, but like I thought maybe if there was one doc that could beat the celebrity bias, it would be this one, especially because it had a lot of steam behind the campaign. But now we know for sure. Stay away from celebrities when you're making your doc predictions next year.
Yeah, push them for Emmys instead is what the lesson should be learned on that.
Honestly,
The other thing about this category too, and this is very important, and I think this is something that a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of the critic awards, if you watched, just followed, and there's so many critic organizations, but if you watch and look at the list from this, you would honestly thought this was a two-legged race between Will and Harper and the Superman documentary. And I think it's very important to note that those very rarely, any of the critics groups very rarely transfer over to Oscars when it comes to documentary category.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens here because I feel like soundtrack to a coup d'etat is just so creative. It reminds me of Summer of Soul a lot, just in terms of its construction. But I feel like No Other Land has a certain urgency to it that soundtrack to a coup d'etat does not, given that it's about history, not about what's happening right now.
It depends. I feel like it also depends on the mood, and we'll see it. I mean, kind of how you noted, like crime and music are a theme, and we'll see it with Emilia Perez you will kind of see a theme emerge, I think, with voters onto what if they are voting, when we do find out who wins, if they are voting with a sense of urgency or, with something a little more like music.
Well, No Other Land still does not have an American distributor. The fact that it got the nomination at all is a huge show of passion for that film. So that's something to look out for potentially, I would say.
Yep.
Well, we have the best international feature category next, where we all thought there were three locks, and we were all right. Because I think people were worried that Secret Seed of a Sacred Fig was going to be snubbed, and it was not. But after everything that went into it, to just get the one nomination is sort of disappointing, but at least it got it. The chaos of Emilia Perez being snubbed here did not happen, obviously. Well, certainly that would have been interesting. And I'm Still Here, which we'll get to later with a surprising bid. Flow got in, which Shadan and Stacey both said would happen, unlike Daomi, which was on two shortlists, didn't get in for either. And then while we all had different things we thought might come in, we didn't see The Girl with the Needle, which was a Golden Globe nominee, coming. And I'm a little surprised, honestly, because I feel like there were other films like Kneecap, which got nothing, or Armand, which I know Stacey predicted, and How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies, From Ground Zero, which some of us chose. It is a very good film. It's certainly an unpleasant film. I think Vermilio I probably would have put in before that as a prediction. So it's just interesting because this category also, like, getting 15 shortlisted films is sort of a tease because there's such good stuff on there, like Waves and other things that, like, I hope people will see. But now it's like, again, still a very, very good film, and I think we'll do some coverage of it. But just an interesting, sort of unexpected choice. Shadan, do you have thoughts?
Well, I was gonna say The Girl with the Needle was again in my predictions for a long time. I moved it to sixth place, like what happens. But a lot of love for black and white films this year, and maybe that's something we need to look out for in the future and pay attention to.
We talked about this during, I think it might have been for the SAG predictions, about the idea of it being black and white and it being that kind of being in style right now. And because that one was my six, I was like, I kept kind of going back and forth with that. Another one, I was like, well, let's just put our hopes and dreams in here and see what happens.
I think what's interesting about this is, and the reason why I picked, so I had a twofold issue here. I let the BAFTA nominations kind of cloud my judgment for Kneecap. And I have to remember that, like, the BAFTAs are like probably the most like unlikely to predict stuff, because it's really like, there was a year one time, I remember it was a couple of years ago, where like none of the things that won a BAFTA like transferred over. Or if it was it was very, very few things. I shouldn't say none. There's always going to be a transfer over, but there was so few and far between. But I just thought, like, oh, all this Kneecap love, like maybe that's going to do it. And then I think it was a conversation I had with Abe, and he was like, I don't know if Flo's going to get dual nominations. And I was like, God damn it for taking that one out, because I knew it was going to happen.
I feel like, look, for me, Kneecap is a very, I got to do interviews for it, and so it's more of a sentimental vote. I feel like it has been consistently snubbed this year. It's like every time you think Kneecap's going to get some love, it doesn't. But in the hearts of, like, critics and, people who really enjoyed it, yeah, of course, we're, like, still rooting for it. But yeah, it didn't. Weirdly, the whole, the Emilia Perez being in this category and Best Picture is, like, really throwing me. I am like, how is this gonna work? Like,
I think we've been saying it for a long time. Everyone's like, we don't know how Emilia Perez is going to do. There's backlash, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, but it still got the most nominations. It still is beloved by a lot of people.
Well,
and the people who don't like it are not Oscar voters.
Where is but it's up for Best International and Best Feature. So what happens if it wins both? Could it win both?
It's very possible.
It's possible.
Parasite.
It is possible.
Yeah, Parasite.
But we don't have
Happened
other, like,
before.
Crouching Tiger people thought would have happened with that, and then that didn't win Best Picture. So I feel like in this age, it definitely, like, doesn't really have a lot going against it right now, which is pretty surprising because if you read anything on Twitter, it has everything going against it. And so that's an interesting contradiction that somehow it did very well here. I personally, I don't necessarily mind the Best Picture and International Feature double, because again, I'm Still Here is actually also in both.
Yes.
But Flow being in for both, I sort of would love if we have this, if we're going to have the specialty categories, I like the idea that they're not overlapping because it honors more films. And I think Flow is certainly deserving, and people love it. And I actually do believe it is a strong contender for Best Animated Feature to win there, but it's not going to win this race. So it just seems a little illustrative. Sometimes it feels like they're just there and they're not going to win. And the nomination is a victory, of course, but I would glad that we didn't have that kind of overlap, personally.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts on international, or should we move to our tech categories?
Well, let me
Tech.
ask you this. I guess this is a general question, but do you guys feel like they did a good job of spreading the wealth this year? I mean, obviously we had a lot of films that got like a lot of nominations, but then we did get some surprises thrown in.
Nope.
No. Yeah.
No.
Negative. No. No, I understand what you're saying though, because there were some like, and we're going to get to them, but there were a few nominations that I was genuinely and happily surprised about. But I guess I want to talk about more once we get to the category, because there's one category in particular where I was like, why is this happening? So we'll see.
I also think there's a lot of stuff that still is deserving, and just because it doesn't spread the wealth doesn't mean the nominees aren't. Like when you look at a category, you're like, "Wow, that's a good category." And you're like, "Wait a minute, it's missing this, this, and this, and this." That doesn't mean it's bad. And this is what we talked about with a lot of stuff like Shogun and Baby Reindeer for like our TV stuff. It's like those are still getting awards, and it's like they're still good. It's just this is the time to honor them. And so the fact that like when you have a film that sweeps an award cycle, which I don't think we do, because I don't think we know what the front runner is just yet. It can get tough when it's like again, or it can be a case of, Chadwick Boseman, where it's like he's going to win Best Actor, of course, and then so it's a little surprise at that end like that. So I think, yeah.
What's so interesting about the season is that it is kind of boring in a way. However, it's also completely unpredictable, and it's very hard to see where people are being swayed exactly in terms of a winner. We can know the front runners, we can know the ones that are actual contenders, but when it comes down to predicting a winner, it's like, well, who's voting and what did they see and how much of it did they see and who do they like? And it's like you're doing these on these films that are kind of like, as much as I couldn't stand Oppenheimer, it was extremely epic. But The Brutalist, it's missing something, but a lot of people are still responding to it in that Oppenheimer way. So it's like, but it is kind of there's a sect of people who are like, oh my God, it's the best film of the year. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen. And then there's some people that are like,
It ticks a lot of boxes. You're right.
Yeah.
It just does that Academy Award thing that's like
Exactly.
the general, this is what we vote for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's understandable,
Well, in terms of Stacey,
Sorry, go ahead,
really, I was gonna say, and I don't mean to jump forward, but in terms of Stacey really knowing what she's talking about, she was the only person to predict the wild robot getting in, which is one of my favorite nominations of this morning. So can you tell us like the Nostradamus, like how did you what did you do?
A lot of it was like eeny, meeny, miny. No, no, it's just you get that feeling. Some of them I was completely wrong, but it's so funny. I have a weird pattern of like, if it's not 5 out of 5, it's 3 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 3 out of 5, just consistently. And the two that are missing are usually the two that I'm like, this would be my heart's content. This is the one that would bring actual drama and like actual kind of conversation. Let's see if they do it. And then they're like, no, we're going to stay typical.
This best sound that we're talking about, by the way, we'll come back to best visual effects, but we all predicted Emilia Perez and Wicked, which were nominated in almost every category. So good guess, everyone. A Complete Unknown, which really overperformed, and honestly, the sound of that music is great. The live music, like we'll go for that. Dune Part 2, which had a pretty miserable Two Towers style day, 4 nominations total, and Stacey, the lone predictor for The Wild Robot. which I don't think there's too much too surprising in this category. I think we all might have been concerned about Joker Folie à Deux showing up. Some of us excited by that, those of us who liked it, but that did not happen. But otherwise, I think that was a great pick, Stacey, and definitely a show of strength. That said, I don't think a Best Sound nomination is the ultimate like sign of true strength, especially given another snub that we'll get to later for this film.
Well, I was actually really surprised about Alien Romulus wasn't on Best Sound, right?
No.
It wasn't Best Visual Effects though.
There we go. Okay, yeah. And that movie is so hinged on sound. So again, it makes you kind of wonder where I don't know. I'll think about it more, kind of what I want to say. But yeah, sound was an interesting one. I was interested in Joker. There are some of these that are just like you were saying, people are like, oh, I like Amelia Perez, so click, 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 or I like this, so click, 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 click. And it kind of makes it hard for then the other categories where, especially with these technical awards, where it actually is the thing, it makes it hard for it to really have a fighting chance. So
I feel like also, just by the way, I feel like this was one of Gladiator 2's only really good shots. Like obviously it came up like no Best Picture, no no Denzel. Like this would have been the chance for them, and when it didn't appear here, it was kind of like, all right, it's they're not going to have a very good day.
yeah.
Siri, we predicted this like way back when we did this. Remember, we talked about Gladiator being the movie that like when it came out, like everyone was like, oh, it's gonna be in every category, and like it ended up in one category.
Because they saw it.
Yeah.
And it's not the one I would have thought either. I would have thought production design for those like epic arena things rather than costume design.
Yeah.
Because I feel like costume design is, I mean, sure, it's very impressive, but it sort of seems sort of standard. It's like they're in their, that era gear. And I don't know, but I that really was a big nosedive for a film, a sequel to a Best Picture winner, sort of like not a Best Picture winner, but Joker Folie à Deux, that like compared to the nominations leader that year to absolutely nothing. And I feel like Gladiator 2 at least got better reviews overall than Joker, so it's a little surprising that it was completely omitted.
Yeah.
Looking at visual effects, we have Four Monkeys and Alien Romulus.
So this is.
I just thought about it. It's only monkeys. It's like you didn't just think about that. We've been saying that for months. But actually, no, sorry. No, how monkeys do. What am I talking? So Three Monkeys, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Well,
Better Man did get in. Dune Part 2, which I still think is the frontrunner here, and Alien Romulus. I'm surprised that Mufasa didn't get in. I had thought that would, given just how extensive it is, the process of making that film. And Deadpool and Wolverine did not get anything, which is not too surprising, though. Again, I think that's a pretty, for whatever you think about that film, it's quite a visual feast.
I think that for Mufasa, it suffered what we thought a complete unknown was going to suffer. And a complete unknown kind of came out a little bit before, but I think it came out way too late. And I think that it's the Disney of it all. And there's kind of a fatigue for those live action kind of redos of these animated properties. And so while it did great at the box office, I don't know that enough critics even really saw it or really were involved in it. And enough, I guess people would have seen it in terms of a voting body. I don't know how many people actually saw it, because that was one of my picks, but that was the one that was off, because I got everything else. And I was laughing because I was like, oh, is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, are they going to do that and Better Man? But I was like, if Better Man has a chance anywhere, it's here.
I just, off of that, I'm gonna say I think this was a real big surprise for Better Man. It has been picking up a lot of steam lately. I just like people are really talking about it, and I feel like this is going to be people have been sleeping on this, and now they are awake. Like this is I would not be surprised if Better Man actually goes on to win this.
I agree, actually. I agree.
I still think Dune is far and ahead. Like, even if Dune's not going anything else, I think Dune is pretty locked here. That said, we have seen some surprises in this category. Ex Machina, The Golden Compass. Like, there definitely is the possibility for
Okay,
that
so
here.
wait, let me ask you, do you think though Denny not getting the best director nod is no, you
That
don't think
category is a hot
Still-
mess. That
Oh,
is
it's a hot mess. I know. I
Guys,
know.
no
We're gonna
jumping
get
ahead.
to
No
that.
jumping ahead. We have too many
We're gonna
categories
get-
before that.
Well,
Dune-
can I just
Dune
say,
has
I
won-
think
still won 6. So I feel like even without Denis, I think this one is fine. It's the only one, but I think it's fine. Shadan.
I was just gonna say, I think in general, a big theme was like the sequels, as you mentioned, Abe, did not do well. Dune did not do well. Gladiator 2 did not do well. I mean, even Kingdom of
Inside
the
Out
Planet of the
2.
Apes could have shown up more places. Inside Out 2 could have shown up more places. Like they did not like, and it was a big year for big sort of marquee sequels, but
Twisters. Don't forget
Twisters.
about Twisters.
yeah, Twisters, nothing for Twisters. Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
we're all so eager to talk about the major categories. So let's keep going with our tech stuff. Best original song. Both songs from Emilia Perez did make the cut after all. The Journey, the Diane Warren song. Elton
called
John,
that.
which was something I thought, and none of us thought Like a Bird from Sing Sing. Unfortunately, that means that The Wild Robot missed, which is pretty crazy given that I actually went to an FYC event for that song and they were really pushing it, and it's a great song. And Diane Warren was at that event. Like, this is something people were clearly like seeing and listening to. And so I understand, Elton John, Diane Warren, and that makes sense. I'm still very surprised by Sing Sing being here. I'm thrilled that it got another nomination, but I did not expect that.
That is the one where I was sad that I didn't predict that, but it just was not even on my radar. It didn't even come to me because we're going to talk more about Sing Sing later, but that was shocking. However, this is one of those categories where I'm like, how did El Mal and Mi Camino make it? I can't understand
all along.
I guess, but yeah, but I'm like, who is, because I feel like you either like one or you like the other.
I look at what happened with Barbie though. It is the same.
That's
It's a
fair.
really similar thing. We had this discussion before on one of our Zooms, and it was the same thing. Like, how are people going to vote one or the other? Because it's so hard to choose when you've got two from the same film up there. But it happened with Barbie. So,
I
you
actually
know,
think what happened, because I was like, I cannot tell you the difference between those songs, or like there's one part that where it's like, okay, but that was the one that I was expecting to do better, which was Mi Camino. But
Yeah.
I'm like, were people like trying to sing it in their heads and they're like, oh, I don't know which it is, so I'll just vote for them both.
I do think
I mean,
one is Serena, but yeah.
the real travesty, Abe, is that the vasectomy song didn't get nominated. I mean, that's the real travesty right now. Like,
Thank you,
let's just
Scott, for
call it.
always grounding us in seriousness and important
Bravo.
tangents. Well, I will say also, I don't know if people noticed, but Challengers got absolutely nothing.
Yes.
And similar, actually, Luca got nothing because Queer also wasn't up for Best Actor. So
Wow.
that his whole thing has surprised me because I think he has such strong devotees. I think Suspiria was on a bunch of shortlists back in the day. Like, the fact that it's very odd to me that, and I was not a fan personally of Challengers, so I'm not very sad about it.
I am
But
I
still
love
surprised.
Challengers.
super
Yeah.
shocked. I am super shocked with this one. And I voted for this one. I thought it was going to be best song and certainly best them not. I mean, we'll go on to that, but like the snub for best score is like I did not have that on my bingo card, let's say.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
was wild. That
Yeah.
because it has been getting so much attention,
Always something.
but it's just not translating.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think for Best Original Score, despite the fact that Challengers missed, which we all predicted, and only Stacey predicted Wicked, this is not actually a surprising or very creative category. We have The Brutalist, The Wild Robot, and Conclave. And then we have two films where I think we've all said it's hard to distinguish between the score and the song, Emilia Perez and Wicked. And so I thought Nosferatu would get in. Stacey went big on Blink Twice. Those did not. But there's plenty of other stuff. Blitz, absolutely nothing. Gladiator 2, Horizon, I was gonna have to see Horizon Part 1. There's a lot of, there's all these things that could have gotten in, but this feels like
I just said, what are the top 5 and throw them in there.
but maybe it's a five-way race because, like, again, if Emilia Perez and Wicked got nominated, if you can tell me what score and not song, I don't know. Again, the music is great in both, I think, but yeah, I'm
Scott
just
got
not
mad
sure.
and ran
Yeah,
away.
Scott
He
got
was like, I
mad.
can't take it anymore.
We'll
The
see.
Reznor and Ross snub was too much for Scott.
Exactly.
I also
Oh my
like,
goodness.
again, we've had this in the past, the fact that, First Man won at the Golden Globes and then was snubbed. For the song, I think it was a thing every year that if the song won at the Golden Globes, it didn't even get nominated for the Oscars. So I feel
Wow.
like
Yeah.
because that's the only televised, like, big high profile show that we've had so far, we rely a little bit too much on that. And in some cases, The Girl with the Needle, we should have relied on that. But in other cases, maybe not. So I don't have as much to say about this category as I would like. But because I would have Nosferatu, I feel like I would have liked to see her, and that film did about as well as we might have thought. Not
Yeah.
as it was not the Nightmare Alley Best Picture surprise. Some people said it could be, but I feel like that was a technical element that was pretty good. Maybe Scott left because Waltzing with Brando didn't get nominated for
I
Best
know.
Original
I had fingers crossed, baby. I was like, come on, Waltzing with Brando. And it didn't perform.
Well, this is the only place that A Different Man did get nominated, which is we all predicted along with Wicked. We did not all predict Emilia Perez, but as we said, it's in everyone. And sure, there's a lot of makeup, especially with Emilia's character pre-transition. Like, I get that; that's totally fine. Nosferatu and The Substance, though, those are two, like, you know, borderline horror films that really, I don't know. I think this is a pretty impressive category that really does a lot. And while we might have liked to see Maria here, that ship has beyond sailed.
Yeah, they're
Unfortunately,
done.
for
You
its
know,
supporters.
It's done.
So I was not so surprised that, and I've talked about this before, that Angelina Jolie did not get the nomination, but this is the one place that I actually had Maria coming in. This was the one place that I thought if that movie was going to come through, it would have been here. And no, that didn't happen.
I thought either
Well,
here or costumes, and it just was like, nah.
Yeah.
we actually didn't predict this, but the fact that Dune Part 2, because there were some categories we'll get to that actually I got surprised that Dune Part 2 made it in, but like how did that even miss? Like, I don't know. I'm mad. Maybe I need to leave. And then let's talk about The Apprentice for a second, because that had a relatively good morning, but then why then did the hair and makeup not come along? Because a lot of times though it's paired. So The Apprentice missing here was very surprising to me.
I don't know. I think, yeah, it's a question also here with makeup versus hair. And I feel like the nominees that we have really, I mean, maybe Wicked is more hair, obviously, but the other nominees really are very makeup heavy. And I still think that, pre this category getting renamed, that's still where a lot of this goes to. Scott's back. Scott, we just
He's
talked
back.
about Brando did not get nominated. That's why you left. You were so mad.
Oh, yeah. I was just like, you know what? Forget about it. Okay. We had a whole campaign planned. We were going to get T-shirts. We were going to go stand on Hollywood Boulevard, and they just blew it. They just blew it.
I will cut this rant short and take us over to best film editing, which was a fun category because none of us, like, we didn't have a single film we all predicted. I must say, though, even though it's a good list, to me, it's like this is if there was a 5 Best Picture nominee race, these would be the nominees, and that's a little surprising because we've had some more interesting nominees for editing in the past. So we have Anora, which is the first time we see Anora now because it wasn't ever going to be in any of those other categories except maybe makeup. But we have Anora, The Brutalist, Conclave, Emilia Perez, and Wicked. I'm a little surprised that September 5 got in for screenplay and not here.
Mhm.
And the substance, I think, would be the only one that, like, big miss. Dune Part 2 probably. Is that what you were going to say, Shadan, here? You were surprised by?
Well, I was going to say what surprised me is in terms of The Brutalist, because a lot of people were saying like it's not going to get editing because people don't think that a 3-hour movie is edited well. So the fact that it did get editing means that people are actually paying attention. The fact that it shows up in other categories where maybe we were thinking, oh, they didn't make it to the second half or whatever, but clearly they did. So I'm very interested. Like, did it get in because people are liking it and watching it, or did it get in because people like the actors involved? I don't know. I'm curious to see how this plays out.
It's funny because I think that it actually shows that a lot of people aren't making it to the second half and they're judging it on the first half because the second half editing is where it goes crazy, especially that epilogue, which I'm still mad about. Even though I really enjoy that film, that epilogue made me so angry. But yeah, I think that a lot of people just aren't getting to it, but they're like, oh, well, it's the big thing to do. So let's kind of check it off. I was actually 4 for 5 with this category, and I really didn't want to put Honora in there because I have a love-hate thing with Sean Baker. But I was like, I know it's going to get in. Like, of course it is. I was also surprised, though. I did predict The Substance, and that one didn't make it. But I was also surprised that September 5 didn't get in that one either. Because they are trying to get that in, and they got it
my
in
God, they are.
a category. I was like, okay, I guess this works. Sure.
Yeah, this is for me, this was another one I thought Dune Part 2 would have made it. And I swapped challengers. I swapped Nora out for challengers because I really thought that was gonna have more momentum coming from like what we just saw. But yeah, missed the mark
Getting
there.
nauseous just turning my head back and forth to watch the tennis ball. You know,
Right.
Well, moving on to best costume design, it's interesting that we all predicted a complete unknown because I feel like a couple weeks ago that was not like a lock at all. And I, if also I'm correct, that missed, yeah, missed at the Costume Designers Guild. So it's interesting that we all went with that. Wicked, obviously, as we mentioned before, Gladiator 2's only nomination. Nosferatu, they went for that gothic thing. And I think by accident, maybe we all missed Conclave because there were a lot of robes in that. Like
Yeah.
that's a lot of costumes. Like that's not really a surprise.
But
Well,
it's
here's the
also
thing.
it's the
Go
same
ahead, Stacey.
costume. I will say I loved the different costumes between the different clergy, like depending on where they were from, they had different costumes. But like, I don't know that there was enough emphasis and attention past a nun's habit and a priest's robe, which we've all seen before. So yeah, I was kind
Yeah.
of wondering about that.
That's
I-
exactly what kept me from predicting it too, where I was like, we had like the two popes come out. Like we've seen these costumes before. And then what surprised me was where was I gonna go with this? Oh, I don't remember what surprises me about this.
This one was one of my worst categories. I was like 2 for 5 on it. And it's just because I was like, because I was thinking costumes, but I think I went like, oh, this is one where I said if of course Gladiator 2 was the one. Because this was that category where I was like, well, if it's gonna get anything, it'll get in for that. But this one just had a lot of strange hits. Dune 2 I thought was going to be in here for this because I was like, if I don't do it for makeup, then maybe for costumes, I'll go for it. And they were like, no, thank you. And I was just, yeah, this one was a strange category. Oh, and then this is another one that I put Maria because I was like, if it's going to have anything, it's going to be this.
Yeah, I want to just say, like, I kind of completely agree with everyone's assessment on this because, like, the reason I didn't put Conclave in here is because, again, like we've seen it all before, and I'm actually very surprised by how some of these categories are just like so, like, even complete unknown. Like we all predicted that, but I just knew because it was building momentum. But I'm kind of like, this isn't really like what this category should be celebrating. Like maybe I sound a little snobbish, but like you really look at kind of like Wicked, and it's the only one where you're like, wow, these costumes actually had a lot, which is why I'm like a little shocked about like Beetlejuice not getting in here, because at least there was like inventiveness in the costumes.
But another sequel, and so
Yeah,
we've seen those
exactly.
costumes.
But you know what, Scott? You're absolutely right. And you know this about me. I love color theory. And you know what movie used color theory really well is The Substance. Like if you love that movie, which clearly they did, a great way to honor that would have been The Substance with like the coats that have become iconic and all of that. So yeah, there's a little bit, the lack of creativity here is a little bit disappointing for sure.
I totally feel like this basically leaves us with the two big front runners for me is going to be Wicked and it's going to be A Complete Unknown. They pushed really hard to be nominated in this category. Like there were exhibits at FITM, like there were things that were going on, the way the stories that have been done, the press surrounding specifically costume design. So yeah, like we all predicted it was going to happen. I think that's a strong competitor against Wicked, but I feel like those are really the two in the game.
Think Wicked is far and away here, even if it doesn't win anything else, which I think it will, obviously. But I think Wicked is very strong here. I will also note this is the only place that The Brutalist missed.
Hmm.
That easily could have gotten a nomination. Similarly, Amelia Perez, it's not its only miss, but easily could have gotten here. I think for how much they loved everything, it's a little surprising because there are some pretty cool costumes in that film. That said, like with Honora, it's a contemporary, bias against contemporary stuff. So I would say that production design was one of our best categories, despite Stacey and I picked Gladiator 2. Otherwise, we got everything else: The Brutalist, Conclave, Wicked, and then most of us chose either Dune Part 2 and Nosferatu. So I guess Dune is a little surprising getting in there, only because it missed everywhere, a lot of other places. But I mean, that black and white planet, come on, there's a lot of cool stuff there, and I think as Stacey has said, our black and white obsession for I mean, I guess Nosferatu is sort of grayscale, right? But everything else is pretty colorful, so it's a good range. Any thoughts on this one?
No surprises for me. I
No.
picked all five. Yeah.
Um, for cinematography, we only picked one altogether that got nominated, and that was The Brutalist. And so
This
I'm
was
not
a
surprised Dune Part 2
wild
is here.
category.
I'm not surprised that Maria's here. Conclave, I think, makes a lot of sense. A lot of tracking shots of going down hallways and all that. And Nosferatu is a cool inclusion, but no Nickel Boys, which I know some of us are upset about. And they forgot to
Yep.
check off Amelia Perez and Wicked. Every other category, this one, we don't have them.
This
Yeah.
was such a strange category to me because again, I had Ed Lackman in my predictions for so long for cinematography just because he's such a name within that branch. But then I was like, that movie just completely faded. And then he gets the lone cinematography nomination, which is pretty rare. And then when I was saying, oh, there's something about Conclave that I wanted to say that I missed, is like, how does it get cinematography, but then not yeah, no, it didn't get
The other way.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it gets costumes, but not cinematography, even though cinematography seemed like such a more obvious nomination for that film. That's very, I don't know. That's what, to go back to the points that we're making, I think, Stacey, you said this well. It's like, what exactly are they paying attention to? Like, what are they, sometimes it doesn't, I don't know.
I know I had Wicked in this category, and a lot of that was based on Alice Brooks, and it just did not register. And I was just like, how does Wicked get it, but then, or how does Amelia Perez get it, but not Wicked? And that, because those are Amelia Perez, as interesting of a plot and a narrative that it is, visually it's not entirely like interesting. There's a lot of things that look like sets, and it's very bare bones and very stripped back, and I think that there's a reason to that, so I'm not necessarily against it. But when you have these people that cinematography is the thing, like Wicked is a visual feast for the eyes, and again, you talk about color theory, that is all through Wicked. And so for it not to get anything, and of course I'm devastated about Jomo and Nickel Boys not getting in. So yeah, this is one of those categories that's a little too typical, because I did call Maria on it, because I was like, again, if it's going to get in anywhere, it's going to get in here. But it's like a Doom Part 2, of course. Brutalist, I knew was automatically. Nosferatu could be seen as a surprise, but I saw
was
it coming.
sad about Nickel Boys. I mean, that I thought this in particular was such a dynamic aspect of this film, and it so deserves to get recognized.
Mhm.
So not seeing it in this category was a little bit heartbreaking for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say that, it's so hard to figure out which of the controversies that occur
They're gonna
every
stick.
award season, are going to stick. It's true, because like the Amelia Perez one has not hurt the movie in any way, shape, or form, right? And it's continued to like go strong. But then I remember there was a lot of complaints about Wicked, the way it looked, and like, oh my God, how is Alex Brooks getting all this? And yet then you see this, like, what was surprising to me is that Wicked ended up getting editing and not getting cinematography. So like that was kind of strange. And I mean, I know Myron too, and it's like I'm happy for him, but it's just like it's a weird thing. Like, why do certain things work and certain things don't work? And I mean, I'm going to throw this out at the end, and we don't have to answer it, but I'm just going to say it now so I remember, and we'll come back to it. Do we think that all the Anora backlash online over the last couple of weeks is going to really kind of hurt his chances, and it's going to go home empty-handed? So we'll bring that up when we get to Best Picture.
Well, we're sad about Nickel Boys missing here, but I was so surprised that Best Adapted Screenplay, that was the only nominee we could all agree on, and we were right. But the big thing here, Conclave, Emilia Perez, Sing Sing, and A Complete Unknown, which just booted Wicked. I think most of us thought that Wicked was going to get in, and this was like the first time. This is where Wicked like gets a little bit of weakness. I don't think it's completely dead, but it's definitely not as alive as it used to be. I will note that Shadan Clarence Macklin is now an Oscar nominee for working on the screenplay, so we are very happy about that, despite a miss elsewhere.
That's the only thing
piano
keeping me going this morning, y'all. I gotta be honest. That's the only thing giving me energy.
I don't think there's much to talk about here. I think Conclave won this award already. And you know, I don't know. It's a good category.
I just have to say that in one of our earlier Zooms, my sweet Stacey brought up the idea of the elevated Dan Brown, and that's another one of those like nuggets of joy that has carried me through. And so when I saw Conclave do well this morning, I thought elevated Dan Brown pulled it through in the end. So
exactly. 100%.
Well, for original screenplay, pretty expected, other than September 5, a bit of surprise. Nora, Pain and the Substance. The Brewlist, which I think, Stacey, you bet against in favor of Heretic, which would have been a cool nominee, certainly. Sad, no Hard Truths, which is unfortunate because that really missed, and no Challengers. I will say, though, I didn't realize until the end, A Real Pain had a really bad day. It got this and Curing, that's it. And that is very surprising because I think we all were like, maybe Jesse will get in for Best Actor. Like, we thought it was possibly going to do even better than people was. And it's just sort of strange because I don't feel like people had to be in with the film. I feel like people mostly just were all about it. And the only issue they have is that Kieran is not a supporting actor.
The only thing that I think kind of worked against A Real Pain is that it's just a normal movie about normal guys who are going on this adventure that is definitely a little bit atypical, but it's something that enough people are kind of familiar with, this pilgrimage. And so I think that there were just too many other kind of fantastical things that caught people's attention. And then they remembered, oh yeah, and A Real Pain. And so, yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yep.
And I will say, just on the screenplay front, international stuff, I'm Still Here, we would have thought maybe would be nominated for Adapted, given that got it into Best Picture, but no. Similarly, for Best Original Screenplay, All We Imagine as Light, which was this lauded film, didn't get anything, and that's sort of what makes me feel like it's disappointing about the international feature category, that's like the only place it lives. So if you don't submit anything, then you don't get. So that's, I don't know. I don't have much more to say about that. I am very sad about Hard Truths though, because I was predicting the Another Year treatment, where Leslie Manville was very buzzed about, didn't get nominated, but the movie got a screenplay nomination. And I feel like, especially the fact that Marianne Jean-Baptiste won, the 3 big critics awards that very few people don't get nominated for Oscars after, it feels disappointing for that film that I feel like everybody who saw it loved, just didn't get anything, especially because Michael Lee has a pretty decent track record with Oscar nominations.
And this is where I need to say that if your favorite or whatever movie you loved as much as Sing Sing for me or whatever, like, it's still a great movie. It's still worth watching, even if it did not get the Oscar nominations. And also, I'm just really proud of myself for predicting September 5 here, because I felt like the PGA nomination was going to mean something, and I just didn't know what it meant. So I took a shot, and it paid off for me here. So I have to give myself a
Well, that is a
Pass it.
little movie that could, yeah.
Yeah.
It's chugging along.
Well,
There's gonna
as we
be
get
books written about the award trajectory of that movie. Let me tell you.
Oh
as we
yeah.
move into the acting categories, I actually think supporting actress is our most interesting race, which is not what I would have expected, only because there were so many different things coming. What I just want to say I'm most surprised by is that Stacey, who every second I guess it's the epilogue, you don't hate the second act, but the fact that you're the only one who predicted Felicity Jones is, I think, the biggest surprise of Oscar nominations morning. But
I was pleasantly surprised.
Well, and
interesting.
here's
I'm
the
thrilled for Monica Barbaro. I think that's fantastic. I think it's really great that she got in. And it's a little surprising at this point that Jamie Lee Curtis didn't
Yeah.
get there given the recent love. Shadan, what did you want to say? I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say no. This is the point that I wanted to make about the Brutalist because so many people are saying, "Oh, they're not making it to the second half," where Felicity's whole thing is in the second half. Like, it's funny. I was talking about this with somebody, and they said, "Well, if you don't even get to the second half of the movie, you may not even know she's in the movie."
Well, no,
So,
she does show up in the first half, but it is
oh, it's the
briefly.
end. Yes,
And her a
yes.
lot of her stuff is done through letters, and so a lot of it is kind of the voice of it all. And people are talking about the accents, which we'll talk about in a minute when it comes to the controversies. But yeah, I think that a lot of people are talking about it though, and I think that might be enough for some voters to be like, oh my god, she was great in the second half. I don't know if it's enough for them to watch the second half, but I think it might be enough for them to be like, oh, I like Felicity, and yeah, sure. I was slightly surprised that Margaret Qualley didn't get anything, and we talked about
All
Jamie
predicted
Lee
her. Yeah.
and of course Danielle, which I was just like, but
Not surprised.
yeah, that was a rough category.
Yeah.
So let me ask
Yeah.
you this, because I think obviously Monica Barbaro getting in is a huge show of strength for A Complete Unknown. And she's like phenomenal. She's one of my favorite parts of that movie. Is it a sign of weakness for the substance that Margaret Qualley didn't make it in?
No.
I don't think
No.
so.
No, The Substance did not do as well as it could. It only got 5 nominations just because their director, screenplay, actress, picture, the 4 of those, it's still, The Substance did not have as good a day as it could have.
But
I
those are
think that
good nominations. I mean,
Exactly.
I think Demi is great and probably very likely to win, but I feel like The Substance too even keeled after being an underdog. It didn't perform as grandly as it could have. So. I will note the interesting thing about this category is it only has one returning nominee, and that's Felicity Jones. Isabella Rossellini, her first nomination. I think we can all agree that, especially with Selena Gomez being shut out, it's Zoe versus Ariana, and right now the wins are turning Zoe. I don't think it's enough to sort of pivot it back to Ariana because I don't think Wicked had the day it needed to really be all about that, and I'm not sure. Aside from the fact that Zoe is a lead in the film, I don't think, which Ariana is too, I guess, right? There's not enough going against Zoe to remove her from that frontrunner status.
I do wonder. So, what is the voting? What are the dates for voting?
I don't know if they changed. Let's look.
While you're looking that up, what I was thinking about is with everything going on, are we going to be getting comfort watches? And in that vein, are we going to be getting comfort votes? Because then I could see Wicked shooting up. I could see Wicked really surprising despite these nominations. I could see it going. Whereas something like an Amelia Perez might not hit as much because it's a little more depressing. No one's really watching it for the fun. Whereas
that's why
escapism.
You're completely right. I think that's why A Complete Unknown did so well because that's everyone. It's easy to vote for Bob
Music.
Dylan. The songs are great. You feel good about the songs. Like I think that that's going to be a huge through line in terms of who our winners are going to be.
I wanted to also add in this category. I mean, I know this might sound a little weird saying this, but when I saw that photo of Isabella's Oscar, on the ground with the fires, I was like, oh, she's definitely getting nominated now because that photo went viral, and I was like, no, that this is definitely happening now. Like the moment I saw it, I was like, nope, she's getting nominated.
Yeah, we'll have a lot to talk about. It looks like voting is in the middle of February, so there still is plenty
It
of
is the
time
11th.
Okay.
Yeah.
for that. But I think that, yeah, this category is not as lots as I would think. Moving on to Best Supporting Actor, they announced the nominees in alphabetical order by last name. So I knew Clarence wasn't getting in because they skipped right over to
Ed.
Edward Norton. It is interesting that Guy Pearce, rebounded from that SAG snub with no problem, and that SAG snub kicked Denzel out with no opportunity to come back in. I'm a little surprised that Jeremy Strong made it this way, only because The Apprentice was such a non-contender this whole season. But otherwise, I mean, this was not a surprise. Yora made it all the way. Kieran, Edward Norton, Guy Pearce, Jeremy Strong. Like we some of us went for Clarence, but otherwise, like this category was all too expected, despite having some pretty fantastic performances in it.
As soon as Jeremy got nominated for the Globe, I was like, he's in this race now, because it just kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. Yura, I was surprised about only because it was a smaller role. It was a great role and he did a fantastic job in it. So if anything, I could see him getting in it, but that one did surprise me a little bit.
Yeah, this is great. It's Jeremy Strong's first Oscar nom.
Mm.
Happy to see him in this particular role and getting nominated for this at this time. I think that's really telling. But also, yeah, I had swapped out. I obviously had Clarence over Yura, so I
Yeah.
don't think I wasn't necessarily expecting Honora to do how it performed just
Mm.
based off of what has been happening this award season. Um, it's interesting though. Yeah, this is a little bit like, all right, we'll kind of see what happens. Kieran, I think, is a clear front runner here.
Yeah.
Because yeah, a real pain obviously limited in the nominations.
I don't think there's
Oddly,
anybody else who could win here. I don't know.
Right.
oddly enough, though, I think, again, if we're talking about comfort watches, I think Edward Norton has more of a chance. A lot more people are talking about that performance in particular. So I definitely think that Kieran is a lock on that one, but he might have some people
Competition.
jumping up.
I was also thinking Stanley Tucci from Conclave might show up. It felt like a
Yeah.
J.K. Simmons being the Ricardos type thing, but for a movie that was actually beloved. Ultimately, like Best Supporting Actress, Edward Norton is the only returning nominee here. That's sort of cool and a little unexpected, just because he works so infrequently. It's a little interesting. He's been nominated so much. I am disappointed to say that I prevented us from getting a perfect score on Best Actress because I said Pamela Anderson would get nominated.
We
That did
told
not
you,
happen.
we
Yeah.
told you.
Feels like a Scott thing to say, but the premiere was canceled because of the fires. And that was supposed to be right during voting. And I really am curious if she or at least Jamie Lee Curtis would have made it if they had had that opportunity. I'm also surprised none of us went for Marianne Jean-Baptiste because I feel like everybody was predicting her. It was just too many extra people. My Carla Sofia Gascon snub did not happen. So let's take a moment to applaud history being made. It's thrilling that she's in here.
Yeah.
And I think it is a phenomenal performance. I think people have issues with the film, but it's still a really, really good turn. And Fernanda Torres, really great. Like this is a good category.
I am wondering if she's not going to run away with everything. This is a wild trajectory. And Shadan, you said it that she got up on that Globe stage when she went and made a great speech and, talked to her mother, and she really impacted a lot of people. I think a lot more people then went and watched that movie.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm not brave enough to switch from Demi yet, but I think Fernanda Torres is right there because, spoiler alert, if you have enough passion to get your movie into Best Picture, that means something
Yeah.
potentially. So I'm so excited for her. I'm excited for Brazil. I'm excited for the Brazilian fans having a day on the internet. Yeah,
I love it.
a great nomination for sure.
I am. So if Cynthia were to win, I believe she is like the second Black woman to win Best Actress ever.
And she'd
That's
complete her EGOT, by the way.
ooh.
Also, she's the only returning nominee in this category. Everyone else is new.
So we'll talk about it more with Best Actor, but I think that these wins are really going to show where we're at mentally and just politically. And there is a lot of first within these categories, because this is something where, depending on how people are leaning, Demi could be the choice. But if people are like, oh, whatever, I don't like that movie, it was gross or whatever, then, Mikey slips in. And then,
I
it's
think,
just so
You know,
strange.
I
sorry.
have had, well, I just real quick, I have had all of these actresses picked as my front runner at one point in time. I like this is really hard because I feel like this is anyone's, my gut, it goes in all of the directions. So this is a really tough category. It could go any which way.
I still think Honora did about as well as it could have, and so the fact that it didn't win Golden Globes or anything isn't enough of a sign. I
Yeah.
think the fact that Demi and Fernanda have sort of competing narratives, and the fact that Wicked is not going to win everything as we thought it was, that makes this a lot more. And Carla, there's no reason Carla couldn't win. I think that
Sure.
we're going to spend like an hour of our winner predictions time just on Best Actress, and we're all going to choose some. We have 5 people, we'll all choose someone different.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mikey is to me, she's on the bottom of this category
Yeah.
at this point. I think
Mhm.
she's lost so much steam. And I think also, like when we were talking about narrative, I mean, we talked about this after the Globes, like, the Demi Moore speech and the Fernanda Torres speech was great. We also have heard Carla come out and deliver some phenomenal speeches,
Mhm.
not only at the Astros, but at other award shows, other things online. She's really great. She's very personable. And I think that says something. Cynthia has not gotten enough time in the spotlight by herself. She's always kind of like paired with someone. So we really
Exactly.
haven't heard a lot from her. So I have no idea what's going to happen with her.
I'll also say she'll
But
win for part 2. Like she'll get another shot at this.
yeah, maybe.
So,
I
well,
don't know.
the Best Actor category, Stacey, I don't know if it was a typo on your part that you didn't predict Timothy Chalamet, or you really thought he wasn't going to get nominated.
I
That was a little
refused.
bold.
I refused. And I'm pretty sure he's going to win, and I am angry about it. If he wins this category, I don't know what will happen, but a table will be flipped. So,
I think he does have an edge currently because the film did so well, and because the AI thing about the list, is sort of targeting Adrian most. Coleman Domingo, thrilled to see him here. That would have been a really tough miss. Ray Fiennes, and none of us got Sebastian Stan for this movie
I'm
because
so
Karina
angry.
is a different man, and I'm surprised. That said, I guess The Apprentice is the better performance because I'm still sad that like
I
Adam
don't
Pearson
think
was
so.
nominated for a different man, but
Listen,
it's a strange thing.
it is a sign of what is going on in our world right now. We were all surprised there was the toss up where people were going back and forth with it. I'm happy to see him nominated for this. I'm happy to see this getting as much attention as it is now, but I do think it's a tell of like how, Hollywood or the world is kind of feeling right now and what we're choosing to pay attention to.
But I
And
wonder,
Yeah.
is it just because they like the actors though? Like that's what I think with like Coleman Domingo and Sing Sing. Like I know it did get the best song nomination, which is a bit surprising, but I feel like maybe people didn't even watch that movie and they just voted for Coleman because they like
Oh,
Coleman
yeah.
because he goes places and does the hand thing. And Sebastian, like I all season long was convinced that he was gonna split his vote. I'm happy that he didn't, but he was all over the place, shaking hands and doing everything and going to all the events. And guess who wasn't? Daniel Craig. And I think
Yep.
that played a difference. And same thing with Jeremy Strong. Like they were really out there, and so I think that it paid off for them in the end.
I also
Yeah.
think Sebastian Stan, I mean, The Apprentice, he could have gone very broad and just done a Trump imitation. And instead, it's like that, like you see little glimmers of who he is now, but it's not that the whole way. And so I think the subtlety to that performance, especially for someone who like the what is it, the Falcon the Winter Soldier, he's just like grumpy the whole time, like he's not doing anything. Like seeing subtle acting in someone who doesn't always, you might think of like fresh other things for him. It's an interesting turn for his career when he could have just been this like blockbuster king, to see him really going for something. That The Apprentice it's a weird movie. It's an interesting movie, but it's a weird movie, and that makes his performance all the more interesting because Jeremy Strong like comes in so strong as Roy Cohn, but what Sebastian is doing is just it's very subtle, and I think who would have done a subtle Donald Trump? Like, who would have ever thought that could be a thing, you know?
Well, you know
Yeah.
what's so interesting about it though is that we're seeing kind of another play for the Marvel to serious actor pipeline. And we saw last with RDJ where he was like, I'm done with Marvel. And now then he's like, I'm in Oppenheimer now. And everyone's like, yay. And so now we have Sebastian Stan where he's not necessarily done with Marvel, but he is trying his hand and he is showing that he is an actor, you know, that he does have skills and he has the ability to kind of make choices and not just do whatever is directly on the script. I think that that works in his favor. I don't know about The Apprentice being chosen over A Different Man. I thought that A Different Man was a much, much better film, and I thought his performance was much better in it. I definitely think he made choices with The Apprentice, but I could barely make it through that movie. And that has nothing to do with Sebastian. That has everything to do with Donald Trump. But yeah, this category, I was like, if the AI thing hurts Adrian, which I don't think it will. I think if we got Mikey this far after the whole intimacy coordinator thing, then Adrian should be fine. But if he's not, then this should go to Coleman. But the fact that like Timothy is in there, he's just way too young. And I don't see him as being broad enough for this.
Yeah, Stacey, one interesting, and maybe you guys disagree, but what I noticed about the acting categories is like we didn't really get a lot of like the return of the veterans. Like there's a lot of first time nominees in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of younger nominees in. You know, like I was thinking maybe they're gonna name check Nicole Kidman or Stanley Tucci or Denzel. They didn't. So it's very interesting that I think it's a sign of sort of the new academy, like that a Yura Borisov gets in, for example. So cool to see a lot of first time nominees kind of join the club because you don't see that as often.
Well, this category, unlike the other ones, the other acting ones, I think is not, let's see, has only Sebastian is the first time nominee, as opposed to the other ones where everybody is a first time nominee except one person. We have a lot to discuss in our winner predictions, and we will certainly come back. But Scott, please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, listen, I mean, the two surprise, like certain people online today are like going like two movies that I literally from Venice. I was just like, I don't know what anyone is talking about. I don't know why anyone thinks this is gonna happen. But number one was the Daniel Craig and Queer. I literally was like, I said that first out of the gate, back in Venice, back in September after I saw it for the first time, and like everyone was gonna get it. I'm like, no. Like no. And then the other one, I know that we have some fans in our little circle, and I try not to let my bias get into it, but like the Nicole Kidman of it all, like I'm like, no, that is not happening either. But like it's just funny, like sometimes these narratives happen at film festivals and I'm like sitting there and I'm going like, I know we're in like this bubble right now, but it's like step outside of it because like this is not happening. Like this is not happening.
I want to just get a shirt that just says the Nicole Kidman of it all. And then on the back be like, baby girl, I love this. This says so much.
But it's so funny because we all kind of, I know, well, for me personally, I was like, they took this type of movie and they elevated it, but they still marketed it as this type of movie. And so it was really interesting the way that they were able to do that. However, there wasn't a lot of promo, there wasn't a lot of campaigning for it outside of just, Nicole Kidman in a glass of milk. So it's like, what are we going to do? But as for Queer, I think a lot of people, just didn't get it. But also the best performance in that movie was Jason Schwartzman. Like, let's be really real.
Yes.
I disagree.
There's no time for this inane debate, but no, I disagree highly. I will say to Scott's point about film festivals, A Complete Unknown was so late it did not screen at festivals. And thanks to Scott's prediction, it got nominated for Best Director, which I think is quite a get. I think the DGA is known for having a nominee that sort of going to make it to the Oscars, and we all thought that would be James Mangold. I am annoyed because I always thought Edward Berger wasn't going to make it, which is such a shame because he does such a good job with Conclave. I thought Jacques Audiard would be snubbed, but it's also sort of bold that we all predicted Coralie, even though
Yeah.
she didn't get a DGA nomination. So this category is not overly surprising, just the omission of Conclave, because when we're talking about our Best Picture frontrunner, I think that Honora is still in there, but I think we just knocked out Wicked and Conclave, that they have much more uphill battles now because a Best Director, like, there's a lot. These are big movies. There's a lot going on in them. The director is very involved. And while something very intimate like Nickel Boys, Ramel obviously would have been a good choice. Also, you understand why a lot of people vote for something that looks like a big effort, and they think that that maybe is more work or something. And
Well, and
so
it's interesting. This is Berger's second snub now in the Best Director category after delivering like two very beloved films. So I don't know what's going on there, but
they seem to be, despite, I'm still surprised that Thomas Vinterberg got in for another round a few years ago, because that's like the subtle international film that you think like might get there, whereas All Quiet like was such a juggernaut and really overperformed. I don't think it was a snub for Best Director. I think he could have gotten in. But now it definitely should sting, because he's not like Bradley Cooper, who's an actor and then trying his hand at directing. Like there's no reason that he shouldn't have gotten in here.
I am personally sad to see John M. Chu not get more love this award season with all the praise Wicked has been getting. I feel like just in the directing department, he's really, just not getting a whole lot of love. So I would have liked to have seen him in this category, but yeah, it was a little bit of a disappointment for me.
I'll be here for part two.
Yeah.
And I just checked because I wasn't sure if Dune part three was coming next year. So we'll get our two snubs back, but it looks like it's 2026. So we'll
Well,
get him next year's winner, John Chu, the year
I
after.
don't, yeah, we know how the Academy feels about sequels though, right?
I thought the snub for this category was Sing Sing. I was shocked that it wasn't in there because it is the only other thing. I think they got best adapted screenplay and then best actor. Has that been
And
it?
song.
In
And song.
song. Oh, that's such a
I don't think
strange
Greg
pairing.
Greg is a great guy. I think I mentioned I met him at South by Southwest and saw him like screening a bunch of other movies. He's great, but I feel like that's a film that, first of all, did not do well this award season, which is so sad. But also, like, he was never talked about as part of it. And it's possible that he would say that, like,
No.
he's the director that should be about the people. Otherwise, he is still nominated though, I think, for adapted screenplay. But I would have loved to see him, but I think Sing Sing's chances faded a long, long time ago.
Yeah. I was
Scott,
excited
did you
about
have something?
Nickel Boys.
Yeah. Well, did you have
Oh
anyone
no,
for
I was
Best
going to
Director
say
before we get
to what Stacey was saying about director category and this I mean, again, zero control over any of this, right? But I was really surprised about Ramel Ross. Like, I'm not surprised, but like, if I can replace two people in this category, the two I would easily replace is Sean Baker, and I would replace James Mangold for sure. And I replace them with John M. Chu and Ramel Ross. Like, to me, it's no brainers. Like, in terms of what they did with those movies, like when you're really talking about direction, that's something, those two things really stand out. And like, Sean Baker's direction's fine, and James Mangold's direction is very kind of like by the numbers, very very fine too. But those two like really kind of elevated like just the look of Nickel Boys and the way it's shot. Like it's again, we talked about this, what you said about the cinematography, Stacey. Like that, to me, that's a missed mark. And then John, considering like his roots of like where he came from, like freaking directing like a music video type like movie to creating like this big blockbuster spectacle with musical numbers and all these moving parts to it. And especially after In the Heights, like he did something so special within the Heights, and I know that had its own like little controversy and backlash behind it, but like to see something of this scale and something that's so beloved not get recognized in this category it's just feels weird to me.
Well, on to Best Picture, our final category. We all predicted A Real Pain and Sing Sing, which were not nominated, which with the 10 nominees, it's always hard to figure out, like, right in the moment, like, what missed. None of us picked I'm Still Here, although I don't think that's a huge surprise given its momentum recently. It is a little surprising to me that it didn't get in elsewhere, like for screenplay or director or other things. And despite Stacey's best efforts to predict against it, Dune Part 2 did get in, which that would have been a real shock, I think, if that didn't get in here. And Nickel Boys is a surprise because it easily, like, you always wonder, like, it's not like you vote for everything and then you're like, okay, best picture, what did I not choose, whatever. And so I feel like having seen the nominees today, might have thought that Sing Sing would have. I definitely think I don't know what I would have thought, but Nickel Boys getting in there is a little bit of a surprise.
I'm
always
really
had the
happy for Nickel.
feeling.
Go
I
ahead,
was just gonna
Shadan.
say really quick. I always had the feeling that it would be Sing Sing or Nickel Boys and not both. But what's surprising is, given that, as Scott was saying, like the direction is so visionary, the cinematography is so visionary and groundbreaking. So you don't recognize it there, but then it has enough passion to get into picture. Like, what does that mean?
I actually had a conversation with Ramel about this and about this exact thing. And I said, people are going to do it and probably not even realize that they're doing it. But right now, your biggest competition is Sing Sing, and they have nothing to do with each other, but that's what people are going to be thinking about. And I've been thinking about that kind of the entire way through. I am excited to see Nickel Boys on here, but I am wondering, how can you say this is the best picture and it's not nominated for any other category? Pretty much, I mean, for in terms of like what we know in terms of like a movie going audience. So none of the other performances have been nominated. We didn't get directing, we didn't get cinematography. You know, there's just something missing there. So I think it is a heart nomination.
I would agree. This is something, I mean, I think you and I are the two that voted for this, Stacey. I am really glad that it did make the best picture, that it did, get the acknowledgement here. But I totally agree with everything you just said of like, it also should have been recognized in several other categories and it wasn't. So not really sure what the best picture nod means, but yeah, I am still glad to see it here. Yeah.
As a statistics enthusiast, which I think we all know
Mhm.
from this point, I'm always annoyed about the fact that we had those years of fluctuating nominees between 5 and 10, and the fact that we have 10, and it makes you wonder if we only had 5 nominees, what those would have been, because A Complete Unknown got Best Director nomination, The Substance got a Best Director nomination, but they didn't get editing nominations. So, like, what would it? Because those are the two categories people often look to. I'm Still Here would not have been nominated for sure, but like Nickel Boys also wouldn't. So isn't it nice that you can say Best Picture nominee Nickel Boys, Best Picture nominee I'm Still Here? But I do wonder in this year, I don't think either of those would have made the cut. I feel like we would have, and I wonder if Dune would have, but I feel like we would have otherwise probably had eight nominees. Um, I'm personally excited, a new milestone for me. This morning, when I watched the nominations, there was exactly one film I had not seen, and I've already corrected that by watching it in the time from when I woke up until now. And so I've now screened every single film in every category, which is always my
Nice.
aspiration. But to have done it, an hour and a half or 2 hours after nominations, I'm very excited. But as we know from doing our predictions, having seen the nominees doesn't always help you predict who's going to win. So I hope that we'll have a chance to all get to watch a lot of these things. And there's obviously a lot of fiery debate and some real personal passions about Anora and The Brutalist that I urge you not to let get in your ways of seeing what's going to actually win. But as we said, there's a lot of time. We don't even start vote for a couple of weeks. And so I guess the best way to end now is, what is your favorite inclusion today? What is the best thing that you saw that was nominated?
I
Nickel
mean,
Boys for me. Yeah.
yeah, both Clarence Macklin and Greg Tweed getting a nomination for screenplay somehow makes the rest of the stings a little bit better. But I just want to say, the reason why we feel so passionately too about the nominations is you have to remember that these nominations lead to people seeing these movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage you guys, like, yes, there's some disappointments here, but there's also some really good movies here. The Substance, Sing Sing, Nickel Boys, I'm Still Here. So some good stuff to dig through now that we have some time before the ceremony.
Off of that, I would totally agree. I think there are some movies like I'm really happy, just again, given the climate, that The Apprentice is getting some more buzz around it. And certainly some happy surprises. But Stacey, yeah, I'm with you. Like I just said, I think seeing Nickel Boys in the Best Picture category was like, yes. Feel good about that.
I mean, it's a very weird one for me to say, but I mean, I really do think I'm very actually happy for Monica getting that supporting actress nomination. And I don't know. Guys, I'm going to be very honest. I'm very, very mixed on the whole Nickel Boys versus Sing Sing. Maybe this is going to be a controversial statement to say, but I'm going to say it anyhow because what the fuck. I hate the fact that someone somewhere probably said this, like, which of the black movies am I going to vote for?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm just going to say it because I literally have been hearing that. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different like publicists and stuff like that. And I heard that statement repeatedly that way of like, only one of them is going to get in. And to me, that's a really fucked up way of thinking. And it really bothers me that both of them didn't there when you like could have easily like just left off Dune.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that when I said I knew it was going to be either Sing Sing or Nickel Boys, it was because I know that like people think that way, not because that's what I thought.
That's what I'm saying. It's no judgment on any. It's no judgment on that for saying that you're happy about it. I'm just saying that internally, like what I'm really processing is that I heard that statement. I'm sure Stacey, you probably heard it too, or you thought it in your head. And I go out there and I say some bold shit sometimes, but I think that's really what it came down to. I think certain people are like, oh, which one of this movie am I going to vote for? And I think, they both should have got in if you really want to.
Well, and I've said this, and I think this is, I don't know, controversial, whatever, but like we've seen the Academy become younger and more international, but that doesn't mean that their choices are reflecting like broader perspectives of like people of color. And it's a shame that like these two small movies have had to fight it out this way, because the point of expanding to 10 films was that the smaller films could get through and more perspectives could get through. So the fact that that's not happening, it's kind of like, well, okay, the Academy is making all of these efforts, but it's not really leading to anything. So
this is the whole thing about why I said it's because that's exactly what I was talking about when I told him. I was like, this is your competition, and he knew exactly why immediately when I said it. But it's so subconscious, and that's why the Cynthia Revo of it all really kind of concerns me, because if it were just, oh, she did a great performance and she might win, but the idea of it being the second black woman ever to win, is that going to work for her or is it going to work against her? And it could go either way. It just kind of depends. That's why The Apprentice being chosen over A Different Man is kind of like, okay, where are we, guys? What are we thinking? How are we thinking? And so when they say, people are like, oh, let's not make this political, but it's like, this is our life now. It is just political by nature, and it feeds into every decision that we make. And so I think that it's going to be, that's why I said it's going to be very telling to kind of where kind of the Hollywood headspace is.
And
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Abe.
No, I'm going to suggest that after this, sometime in the next coming week, we make a list of 10 films that didn't get nominated for Oscars that we believe are important for you to see.
I like that. Yeah.
They obviously see this stuff too, but there are definitely plenty of things. Scott, what do you want to say?
I mean, I just to continue on the controversial statements. I also feel like Coraline got into the to the director category just because they didn't want to have a controversy about the fact fest. That it was just that was all sausage fest. But yet you look at that, and it would have been nice to have a person of color in that category. Just saying, and especially too that I mean, I put my hand on a Bible and swear on it that I believe would be perfect choices to be in that category.
I think Coralie got in because of Demi, and I think and because of what you were saying, but I do think that Demi had a lot to do with it. That win kind of shocked everybody in a really positive way for that movie, because I've been stomping for it. So we'll talk later.
Yeah.
I will say for me, I'm also very excited about Monica getting in because I feel like there are a lot of times, like with TV, let's say The Office getting nominated every year for Best Comedy Series and John Krasinski never getting nominated, or Nick Offerman from Parks and Rec. Like to see someone who I thought was the best in the film, the other people are great also, but the best in the film get nominated is really nice because I feel like it doesn't happen as often as it should. I'm also very pleased about Black Box Diaries for documentary because I feel like
Mhm.
that's another one where you have the filmmaker so intricately involved with the film. So there's so much good stuff. I also was thinking, I don't know, probably an hour ago, we were talking about like, surprises and all that and how there aren't a lot now. My first year really being into the Oscars was 2003 when Cold Mountain got snubbed, Keisha Castle Hughes for Best Actress, all this stuff in America, like crazy, crazy stuff, City of God. And it was the most boring ceremony because everybody you thought was going to win won. So maybe we have the inverse this year. Nominations, not that interesting. Awards, chaotic and fantastic. So as you can tell from today's lively 90-minute conversation, we have a lot more to talk about. We are thrilled. If you've made it to the end of this, please tell us who you are. We want to tailor our content to you. We appreciate you sticking with us for this. But thank you for being here. I'm Abe Friedtanzer.
I'm Sari Cohen.
I'm Scott Menzel.
I'm Shadan Larki.
And I'm Stacey Yvonne.
For being with Awards Buzz.